Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Planet Zoo. We are back in Arcadia, but this looks a little bit different to how it was when we last left it. This was the area where we were going to build a nice big campsite, and I actually had a giant otter sanctuary planned out here using one of our old buildings. But I'm not going to go ahead with that. I've removed it, and here we're going to put a research centre in. And it's mainly going to focus on all of the exhibit animals we currently have available to us. This is because when I've been finding kind of ways to expand and build, I've not been able to find exhibit animals that I've needed. So I'm going to build a R&D centre right here where we're going to have a breeding program for all of the exhibit animals that we have currently in the game, and that's going to give us an opportunity to max out our research levels for them as well. And I wanted to do this because I think large zoos kind of have a research area where a lot of staff would be working behind the scenes to develop new breeding programs and all sorts of other things. So that's what I want to do today. It's going to be a relatively quick and basic build, but I just thought because of where we are now in the development of the zoo, we are going to need to find a way to keep the income rolling in. And that's mainly going to be through trading these exhibit animals once they reach capacity. So with the new tools, we're going to be able to set up automatic management of those exhibits and allow our researchers to just get in. This doesn't have access for actual guests yet, and I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to put that in. I think this might just be a private area that guests will be able to walk past but not actually come in and view the animals. Once they've kind of reached a point where we're churning out gold rated animals, we'll then be able to import them into the zoo properly for guests to have a look at them. Hope that all makes sense, but let's dive into the speed build and I'll talk a little bit more about the design aspect of things once we get started. So I really wanted to keep the decorative theme of this one similar to our entrance. So we're going to be using a lot of white plaster mixed with the conservation wooden pieces that are very familiar with the entrance to our zoo. Given that these are like auxiliary buildings, I'm kind of wanting to go with an idea that it's not just a research centre, but it would maybe be like a school for zoologists and stuff as well. So it would be quite like a sprawling facility. And I'm only building it here at the moment just so that I've got some space. I do have somewhere in mind to actually nestle it so that it's not in and around the kind of main area of the zoo. And it'll be nice and tucked away. But that's going to come later on. So, like I've said, conservation slack cladding pieces are going to be used here in conjunction with white plaster and the classic glass window panes and stuff like that. So you're going to get a little bit of a sense of the stuff that we're using to create this, which I think is going to be really nice, and we'll be mixing in little bits of foliage and stuff to make it look like a proper eco building, which fits with the theme of our kind of research centre, wanting it to be environmentally friendly and having a load of other different things into it as well. The great thing about this is what we can actually do is we can set our vets in here to do research on all of the exhibit animals, which means we'll be able to maximise their breeding potential and unlock as many like different things to do with them as we possibly can. And because every single exhibit animal in the game so far is in here, we're going to be able to start generating some nice breeding pairs, which we'll then sell for cash to keep the flow of cash coming in through the zoo. So lots of reasoning for this, and I'm really looking forward to getting it all finished off. This episode we're going to be mainly focused on the exterior, and what I'm doing is I'm building it on the grid, but we're going to separate bits of it into a different build piece. So we'll be able to take the roof off completely next week when we work on the interior structure and doing all the kind of like finer details. As you can see here, we're using a lot of window pieces, but these aren't going to stay. We're going to be taking some of them out, maybe replacing them with a different kind of glass altogether. But what I want to do is get the core kind of building put in place. So we're using a lot of these this like combination of build piece, which I'm then separating from the main bulk, so I can just copy and paste the various new pieces into my building. And it just means that I'm going to get everything nice and lined up, and we're not going to have any repeating or clipping pieces, and also it's a lot quicker than doing everything manually by hand. So if you are building large structures like this, I would totally recommend you build one main wall piece, copy it, and then just move it out so that you can then duplicate the piece that you want back in. We did this a lot in Northlands when we started building our cabins. We had like a stock wall piece that we used all of the time, and it just made that initial process very easy. So once we'd put all of these wall pieces in, we moved on to the roof piece. And the roof pieces are very similar, so we're using once again classical glass pieces, the panels in this circumstance, and again the conservation slack cladding beams. We do change the colour of these glass panels so that they're brown just to match the wood a little bit easier. And I may then change the white panels on the walls to match the same colour as well. I just haven't decided on that yet. In fact, I better mention right now that the walls that we've put in place, not all of them are going to be glass. We will be coming back and making some adjustments when we actually do the finer detailing on this one next week. But for now, it was just about getting that outer shell done, putting the building in position, and then decorating the outsides of it with some nice fences or signage and stuff like that. Because like I said, I want this to be kind of a school for environmentalists or vets or anything like that, and it will double up as the research facility for this entire zoo. We may then open it to guests, but I haven't yet decided. Anyway, moving on to talk about this roof piece. Now, this was really quite intricate, and the reason I wanted to do this was because a lot of the kind of snapping in place pieces, their curves are very difficult to match up with any sort of framework, and I wanted to do a custom frame on this, so I thought it would be better if we just did a whole custom roof piece in general. And it's more practice for me because I've not done a lot of this. As you can see, we have had to overlap the top piece because of the way that we've angled our adjustments and got that roof into position. I like to, at the moment, I'm not saying this is going to be a permanent thing, just do everything on like a 15-degree angle. It makes it much easier to line things up and you get the desired effect that you're looking for. Obviously, it means that we don't get like complete circles and we use a lot less in terms of our piece count, and as you can see just there, one key mistake that I keep making is deleting my exhibits by accident. This means I then have to put the animals back in and reset the whole configuration. Now, I thought I'd leave that in just so that you know that it's not always plain sailing for me. I do have difficulty. But this leads me on to my other kind of reasoning for building in the way that I am building this one. We actually detach that entire structure, and the roof is now a completely separate piece from the entire building. That's mainly due to the fact that we're probably going to get more than 5,000 pieces, which, as we found with our dome build on the live stream, 5,000 pieces is the limit for your buildings. So you can't have any more than that in certain buildings, in any building as a matter of fact. So I wanted the roof to be a separate piece, which means when we come to decorating the interior next week, we can lift the whole roof off and decorate our interior as we see fit without any annoying camera work and difficulty in adjusting the actual interior of the building. But back to my reasoning for doing this curved roof, I just wanted to do things a little bit different. And doing custom roof pieces is something that I've not had a lot of experience or practice with, so this was the perfect opportunity to do so. And yeah, it was really simple, but we had to have those top pieces overlapping because of the way that the angles kind of merged together. And overlapping at the top seemed like the best way to go about it, rather than trying to adjust the actual curvature of the roof beams themselves. Next, this flat roof here. So where our actual exhibits are, we don't have anything. So I'm putting a flat roof on, and then we're going to create our own version of the flat pack blueprints you get with the conservation pack. So you can unlock them, and they are basically conservation slats with the planted greenery panels that you can kind of shape and merge. They're not kind of built on the grid, so they're really easy to maneuver and get into position. We're going to create our own version of that and then run a nice air conduct all the way along the top. Of course, judging by what we're going to have here, a flat roof, as you can see, as we put in more plaster here to create a little bit of a lip on the top, we're going to need to, when we come to do the detailing, put some drainage of some description on here, because in the real world, this would need considerable drainage. Obviously, we can take the idea that the grass panels that we're going to put in here in a moment, they would be absorbing a great deal of moisture anyway, but we would need some drainage on the top here, because this flat structure with a lip on the top is just asking for a pond to suddenly appear if it rains quite heavily. So we're kind of looking to create little realism pieces within the structure as well. But I acknowledge that this area, as it stands, if I just left it as it is very boring, and we need something on there, which is why we start doing these little grass constructions and the actual aircon units as well, which are going to go down underneath the roof piece into the interior of the building, and they're going to run all the way along the underside of that as well. So we're going to see inside and outside areas where there's continuation from roof to interior, which I think is really important. So again, bit more framework just to hide some of the gaps and things and just make this all look like one complete piece. Again, you don't have to do this sort of thing, but for me, I think it's pretty key, and I really like to kind of do that just to add a little bit more detail in. And obviously, as you can see, the detailing at the moment is a little bit lacking, and that's because I want to do that next week when I've got more time to put into doing the finer things in there. And this isn't going to be a permanent thing. I'm not going to be continuing to kind of like release 2-part episodes. I want to get back to being able to do a project and finish it in one sitting so that we can continue developing this zoo. But at the moment, things are taking a lot longer than expected to put together, and I don't really want to kind of let up on the content that I'm putting out, which is why we're doing these 2-parters for now. Once we get back to building basic habitats and stuff, I think things will come by a lot quicker. It's just for now, it's taken me a lot longer to get content put out and finish doing designs in Planet Zoo. And that's not because we've got live streams and stuff on the go now, it's just a question of the way that my time is being utilized at the moment, unfortunately. Anyway, back to the build itself. So this is what we're going with. We've got these nice curved structures. We're just going to get all of the grass pieces lined up properly, 2 meters and 4 meter pieces, just merging them all in nicely so that we've got a nice continued area there. And then we're going to put some conservation slats in there as a support as well. And once they're all in, we can then move on to our aircon. So you can see where things are starting to develop here. We're fleshing it out a little bit, not too much detail this time, but I want to get a bit of more of an awareness of where I'm going to need to do stuff next week. So this is looking really good at the moment. We just slot these into position, get them all lined up nicely, and we're only doing this on the first roof piece here because we can just duplicate it and move it straight across to the other piece. Using the grid as we have done to create the actual interior structure gives us a lot more freedom to just do one piece and duplicate it across. Obviously, it gives us more of a symmetrical look to the thing, and we could change that if we wanted something a bit more asymmetrical. And naturally, if I was doing this on a building where I wanted that, I wouldn't be just duplicating pieces across. But because I'd quite like to have a quite symmetrical feeling to the whole building, that's why I want to do this. Then we move on to our aircon unit, which is going to loop around really nicely and have like this bit of a duality. So we're going to continue the aircon unit into the interior of the building, so it looks like it's being fed from the interior complex, and then all of the air and stuff is being filtered and moved around and expelled outside. Really simple. I don't know if this is actually going to be an aircon unit that would be effective or useful, but I think it looks pretty good, and that's what it's all about. I'm here to create something that looks good. But you're getting a little bit more of a feel for this, and it sticks with the theme that we have in our entrance, which is also what I wanted, and just leaves us with this really nice, clean and clinical looking area that's different from the rest of the zoo, which has more of a defined theme. And where I'm going to be putting this, I think it's going to sit in real nice with the backdrop of what's eventually going to be our campsite with a few other animals in there. Now, for the rear of this building, I wanted to continue experimenting with the Earthship idea that we integrated into the Woodland Walkthrough staff building and the 2 exhibit houses that are there. Bearing in mind, I still need to move those exhibits into our wetlands area because the animals that are in there are more traditional to the wetlands, so we're going to be doing that soon as well. But the Earthship idea is basically that these houses are self-sustaining and they end up kind of creating this small ecosystem within themselves. So the plants that we're going to be putting inside this building will have like a direct impact on what's going on inside it in terms of the environment, humidity, oxygen levels, all of that sort of stuff. And it's just a really nice way to make a nice environmentally friendly building that is giving back as much as it's taking out. So it's a self-sustaining environment. And I wanted to do that here. So for now, what we're doing is putting in our framework and using plaster again to outline the area. I'll then go back and replace the plaster that's in here in certain sections with glass. That's going to allow our plants to get plenty of sunlight and give a nice effect when you look from the outside in. You're going to be able to see this nice lush green environment. But for now, it was just a case of lining up once again all of the wood and getting a nice timber frame in there alongside the plaster. And I think this is going to look really nice because where I'm going to put it, this is actually going to overlook our wetlands area, because I'm going to put it right at the back, kind of in between the moose habitat and the new wetlands area that we're going to be moving into in the near future as we build our like American wetlands area. And this actually gives us a few things that we can play with. So round the back we can build a nice waterfall in there, because the actual pools of the wetlands end up backing out onto this as well. So there's a little bit of synergy there where we can create a nice water feature with water cascading down. That's not technically going to be part of this build, but we may need to put in some of the framework and finish that off at a later date. And it's kind of now going to start merging all the way around, so our two areas will eventually have that crossover where they meet, and that whole section will finally be completed, and we can start like taking stock of where we're going for the future of this zoo. Next up, I'd created this nice platform right at the front, and as you can see, the middle glass archways have been duplicated all the way around, so they stick a little bit further out than the ones on either side, and that's because our 7th walkthrough exhibit is right underneath us there. And what I wanted to do here was just create some basic skylights just to finish off this area. But later on, the roof extends even further out, so this building gets larger. There's a lot kind of going on here, and a lot of the building adapts as I create it. So it's been a really interesting process, but certainly not one I'll be taking on many more times. I like to keep my builds nice and small and a bit more realistic, but this being like a large centre, you'd think it was like a research campus and things. Like I've said several times already in this video, I'm not going to bore you with carrying on with that. But this is the next step of our eco build. This skylight's going to let a lot of natural light in there, but I'm also going to be putting some of my custom solar panels on there, which are just TV screens with the image of a solar panel on there, and we will then match that all up with like conduit and stuff. I'm stumbling over my words. Anyway, yeah, we're going to put in some nice conduit and stuff, so it actually looks like it's a functioning system of power that is again going to be contributing to the footprint of the power that's going on here. Now obviously we've slammed a generator right down there in the middle of the building anyway, so you're gonna, but I want it to look like that is actually powered by the solar panels on the top and not the transformer that's in here. So when we come to do the interior decorating, we're actually going to hide the transformer completely, just leaving the panel exposed, which I think is going to give it a really cool effect. So it's going to look like when a mechanic comes around here and is repairing the panel of the transformer, he's actually doing work on the solar panels that are on the roof here. So again, a really cool little extra thing that I thought of just on the fly, and that's why this building changes and transforms as we go. You can see the curved front of the roof there, that gets completely taken out, because actually what I'd ended up creating there was something very similar to what the 4-meter curved panels are in the game, which actually go on the grid. So there was actually no need to do something so elaborate for that. But I wanted to do something a little bit different in terms of the curvature of the front of the building. So that changed, we changed the front, and yeah, lots of developments just on the fly as we go here. And then the next step, of course, was to separate this structure from the main building, because I'd made the mistake of doing them as one whole piece. So that all happened, we made those adjustments, duplicated it across, and then we can move on to the next section. The next section is the front entrance of the building. So we took some of our first panels from the actual exterior walls we built and started merging them around into a circular structure. This was then leveled off with 3 of the same pieces repeating, but there's a little bit of a caveat there, as one of them only goes around about halfway across, I think. Anyway, we then filled in the roof on the top, which then left us with a complete structure. And I think it's got a really nice shape to it. It looks a bit like a spaceship, and I guess if we're going to say that this is an Earth ship, then yeah, we've done really well there, guys. I mean, it was completely unintentional, but they're not meant to look like spaceships. I just so happened to have made this look like one. Anyway, we had this tiny gap here that we needed to fill in. So I decided to use some, again, the African plaster bricks to patch up this little hole here. And then we just dragged a few conservation wood pieces all the way down just to give it a really nice finishing touch and merge it all together nicely. Now, these 3 pieces that are at the front here are going to be our front doors, and we're going to once again use the classical glass pieces to create some nice doors, put some customized handles on there. It's very basic, but we may come back when we come in to do the final detailing on this building and finish them off, make them look a little bit more standout-ish and make a few adjustments. But again, it was just about getting this African plaster built all the way up so that we had a definitive front entrance that looked really nice. And again, we could put some like awnings or something on here just to cover it up nice. I was kind of looking back at the Northlands builds that we did, where I did that really nice staff building that was in the side of a mountain. So just looking at this, we're kind of planning out what we're going to do next, and it is just going to be removing some areas here to create enough space for our doorways, and happily it works out really nicely. So we managed to move that across, and we can put in some nice new window panes there once we trim this nicely, get some more panels in there just to really finish it all off, going all the way up into the framework of the building. But it's about making sure that everything's patched up nicely first. Then you can basically see where we're going to be putting our doors now. So this took a little bit of focus, and I really had to get this done. And also we're going to then have to really think about how we're going to do the flooring in that building, because at the moment there's no path in there, but I do plan to put something there so that actually eventually guests and staff are going to be able to go in and out of this building, which means as we go to do our interior, we're going to have to do some work on the wall behind all of this. But I was thinking about doing like a reception area, or we could maybe mock one of these up as a classroom for learning experiences and stuff like that, put in some little bits of seating and stuff and make it look a bit like a lecture theatre, which I think would be really cool in this setting. So there's a lot to think about and a lot to explore when we actually move on to next week's episode, and I'm going to try and break it down and take it bit by bit. So we'll be decorating corridors on one side, then fleshing out interiors in others, making those butterfly nests look really nice, and lots of other different things to do. But back to this, I'm not talking a lot about what we're doing this episode, but it's because it's so simple and basic, and all we're doing is creating a framework which we're then going to attach stuff through. It's basically like when I do rock work, just on a grander scale, but I did want to make sure that these doors had something about them. So we ended up using these anchor braces and just flipping them around and merging them into one another to hide those little holes that are there, the little nuts and bolts, so they get hidden. And then it was just about creating like a little bit of a backplate for this. I tried using these switches, it didn't look great. Then I eventually settled on just using the conservation wood pieces again, which I'm not overly keen on, but I do think they look okay. It's just things like this twilight portcullis bracket and all of that sort of stuff didn't fit the theme very well. So you can see we're exploring, we're seeing what works and what doesn't, but eventually we have to settle on what we've already been using. And I just think they look like handles, basically. They're not overly ambitious, and I think there's more we could do with that, but for now this works really well. You get a nice sense of the doorway. We duplicated that all the way across, and then we have now moved the building into position so you can see where it's sitting in the actual environment of the zoo that we have. And then it was about creating a nice path that merges both of these doorways together and then branches off back into the zoo. I did put in a little bit of foliage, but it was just duplications of stuff that was already down there, but we do need to do a little bit more work to get this all neat and tidy. Once we got this path matched up, it was just about finding like a midpoint for that so that it could then branch off and go through a little bit of a forested area and merge back with the exit of our moose habitat. So you can see now where it's fitting in with the rest of the zoo. And I think this is just a really cool place for it. It gives us a nice bit of a atmospheric kind of feel to this building that's settled in the background of this nice country estate, shall we say, where guests are going to be able to go and stay eventually. And I think it's a really nice placement for it as well, because if guests are staying here, it gives like accommodation for researchers and guest lecturers and students as well. If we were to we could run like a university course in veterinary surgery or something here now, and students would have dormitories and stuff to sleep in. So I think this is a really cool area to kind of have. Then I wanted to dig out a little bit of a lake here with a nice island in the middle of it, which we'll then flesh out with foliage and stuff. And I think it looks really nice set against this backdrop now. So it gives us a lot of stuff to play with, and I think it fits really nicely with the rest of the zoo. So you might be wondering why there's no tour today, and sadly my game has started to crash every so often, which has made getting these tour shots very difficult, and actually is why this episode has a slightly earlier finish than usual. What I'm going to have to do is just spend a little bit of time making sure that, the game is still going to run properly for me. It's a very sad end because there was more I wanted to do here. This is kind of where we've finished. The place is looking pretty good. It's settled in nicely in the background, and I've managed to do a little bit of design work around this lake, including putting in a nice sign that's going to have a custom signage on it that I'll be designing later on after this episode. But I still have hope. It might be that we just need to reduce the guest count or play with slightly lower graphics settings or something. I'm hoping that it's not going to spell the end for this project, because I want to continue it on and finish it all off. But stay tuned, because next week we are going to be hopefully pushing on with designing the interior of this building, and hopefully finishing off all of the foliage in the surrounding area as well. So there's quite a lot to do, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to get it done. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch it, even if this week's has been a little bit more of a bitty episode with not a great deal going on. I think we've made a lot of progress on the exterior, and in particular the roof section of this building, and I'm really looking forward to finishing it off. So fingers crossed for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope in the future, next week, we can finish this all off. Thanks for watching again, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.